Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
Now, we're going to talk about the row which exploded over a racial comment made on Twitter by South African model Jessica Leandra dos Santos. She has received exposure overseas, and another instance of hate speech in Cape Town has highlighted the proliferation of the problem on social networking forums. She caused controversy after using the K-word on Twitter. Although her tweet was later removed and she apologized, it has sparked outrage worldwide as an example of intolerance on social networks. And joining us is life coach Judy Klippen. Good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Ike. Thanks for having me on your show.
This is not the first incident of this kind that we have seen. Now, why do you think we get this incidents now and again on social media?
I think that social media provides some kind of feeling of anonymity. So I think that people feel that they can say anything, and because they can't actually see the people they're speaking to or be seen by the people they're speaking to, I think it kind of gives them some kind of a feeling of almost omnipotence and being able to say whatever they want to without any repercussions, which obviously isn't true at all.
You do have a following, though, and that should make you cautious of what you are saying, shouldn't it?
Sure, I absolutely. I think, though, that in addition to that kind of feeling of anonymity, I think that South Africans, by and large, and this is a generalization, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it, I think that we aren't the best communicators. I think that we, for a variety of reasons, don't always... We aren't very mindful about the way we communicate, and also we aren't very mindful about what we are communicating. We tend to have quite a knee-jerk response, and so if something happens that upsets us, then our response is to vent about it. And, you know, before social networking, we might have to just vent to our families that night over dinner. But now social networking, Facebook, Twitter provides another forum for people to vent their anger or their disappointment or their frustration or whatever it is. And I think because it's so instant and it's so easy to access the social media these days, just off our cell phones, people kind of do it as an instinctive response without really thinking through what they're going to do and what they're going to say.
The use of derogatory words itself, do you think it's something that people think about when they start tweeting?
You know, I hope it's not something that they think about. I hope it's because they just are acting on impulse and kind of in the heat of the moment. I do think that we aren't mindful enough about the way we communicate and what we say and how we say things. I think that, you know, there's a very good reason why people say to you, never respond to an email in anger. And that is the reason, because when you are feeling angry, you say things without thinking them through. And I think, unfortunately, social media is just too easy to press to hit that send button.
Well, we will come back and talk some more about what you just explained, heat of the moment, anger, and we do that without thinking. Is it just an excuse, or is it something that people harbor all the time? We will continue with that. Judy Klippen is our guest. She's a life coach, and we're taking your calls 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207, our SMS line 34701, and those are charged at 2 Rand. And the question is, why is it that people vent out their anger on social media networks? We'll be taking your calls when we return.
Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
And we are asking the big question, why is it that people vent out their anger on social media networks? 0891 104 207, SMS line 34701, and we're taking your calls in a short while. But Judy, coming back to what you said just before the break, you said sometimes we're not good communicators. We say things at the heat of the moment, out of anger and without thinking. Are we making an excuse, or is it something that needs to be considered before we react to whatever has been said on social media?
You know, I think that they're two separate issues, Ike. I mean, I think that the first issue is how we communicate, and that kind of venting and in the heat of the moment, and not thinking through how we say what we want to say. But obviously underlying that is the second issue, and that is, what are we thinking? Because really we communicate what we are thinking. And I think that, so I think it's important to understand that what we think is one thing and how we communicate it is another. So how we communicate it could explain, why people vent in the heat of the moment. But what we are thinking and to be perceiving the world in the way that we are perceiving it in order to use language like that, that's a whole different avenue of inquiry.
Let's go to the calls now. Figile, you are in Cape Town. Welcome. Hello, Figile.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Yes, thank you guys for taking my call. Hello, Ike and your guest. I think it's a way of somebody experience, the way he or she feels about a black person, mostly in Cape Town, because here in Cape Town it depends a lot, and mostly to those who are sometimes members of the DA. I don't care whether you're the DA, what's called a provincial or a national office, just don't respond to your complaint. I've been called more than 8 times as a customer, though I had a DA card, by white and by colors. It's most of the colors that are using that term or that word in Cape Town. So I don't need only to comment on that. But it's actually the way in which one wanted to express the way in which he feels or she feels about the black person. Thank you, guys. That's my call.
Figile in Cape Town. Alec, you are in Johannesburg. Welcome.
Good afternoon to you guys.
Good afternoon to you.
Look, I think it's a poignant issue, but I think that what has happened, and because Ashraf's been talking about it for a while, is the Anglo-South Africans. And what it comes down to is that people are so incensed by the situation generally that their natural psychological reflex action to an event or an incident will give rise to their sentiment unreservedly how they feel about something. So the question probably has a number of heads is whether they should feel like that in the first place, whether what they've got to say has any credibility, and whether they should use that forum or format. And possibly to some extent it is necessary for people to be able to communicate unreservedly so that they can express it as they see it and as they react to it. It may not be the perfect reaction, as is wont to be with humans, because we always tend to act incorrectly on not full information or wrong information. But the fact of the matter remains is that the reason why people vent on cell-phone network may not just be the issue, that may just be the straw that broke the chicken's back or the camel's back. And it's because it's hurtful to other people and or harmful to other people that it obviously raises the ire of everyone. But it is a mechanism by which people feel that they can actually generate an audience and be heard, because they have no other vehicle or mechanism to vent their frustration. And a classic example is the advert that happened just before your calls, where your station was advertising a program on TV on SABC3 for the 30th of April, which was about a week ago. Now, with the general story of SABC and whether we're getting value for money and money being extorted for us to pay for it, anybody who heard that would become incensed. And the only way that they could express their individual opinion would be by some sort of social network for them.
Alec in Johannesburg, let's hear what Judy has to say. Your response to the 2 calls that we've heard.
Okay, Ike, I couldn't really hear the first call very well. I don't know if maybe you can summarize what the gentleman was saying.
Figile was saying, because he's calling from Cape Town, he says it's generally used. It's a term that the K word is generally used against blacks, and it's mostly used by white people who are in Cape Town and the colored people when they refer. And he says it's the way that they view you and the way that they look at black people.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, in response to both of those calls, I think that one must be very careful of making generalizations, and I think that each individual has got their own story and their own life experience, which motivates them to respond to situations the way they respond. I do think that there is obviously a sense of frustration and feeling unheard all across the board in South Africa. I think, however, that one of the things that isn't the most productive thing that we do in this country is to lash out and to do name calling and to do labeling and to make those generalizations.
I've got also some two Facebook messages that have just come through. One from Tabang, who says there are no rules or constraints on what to vent on social platforms. And the other one says it's emotions. When you are happy, you use social media, same as when you are sad or angry. But I guess what we're trying to drive home is think about what you are going to say and the repercussions thereof.
You see, I mean, exactly. I don't think that there's any issue with people expressing anger or frustration or happiness or joy or whatever. But I do think that when we use language that is offensive and that is classified in terms of our legislation as hate speech, then it's problematic, and that we need to be quite mindful about how we are expressing ourselves. And it obviously does point to a larger underlying problem of what is it that we are thinking and how are we thinking about our fellow countrymen and women that allows us to express ourselves in that way. And that, for me, is what is more concerning. It's not that they're using social networking to do it. It's that people have got thoughts which are fueling this kind of venting on the social networks, and that for me is what we aren't paying enough attention to.
One of the other questions would be, is it the way that we are socialized? Are we hung up on race?
Well, I think that, we live in a multiracial country. I don't think we hang up on race. I think race is an issue. I think that potentially, I do think it's the way we socialize. I don't think anybody is born racist. I think that it is something that we learn. It's something that we are exposed to through our families and our friends and our schooling and the media and, whoever we get our messages from. So I do think that, unfortunately, I think that South Africa is still a highly racialized society, and I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that we're not.
Just finally, Judy, if you were to give advice to those people that use social media, what would your advice be when you want to vent?
I think my advice would be to vent mindfully and to vent in a way that if somebody who didn't know you was reading the message that you were sending, how would they perceive you as a person? So try and look at it objectively before you send it. And also try and understand what emotions are giving rise to that need to vent, and ask yourself if venting on the social media is the most productive use of those emotions.
Judy Tlipin, life coach, thank you for your time.